Is Nigeria creation only a star system or a vector of development? What image does it convey in and of Nigeria? What kind of relationship can be built with France in the cultural sector? These are a few of the questions we'll try to answer tonight. Before leaving the floor to Aderinsola Adjao, the moderator for tonight's discussion, and 4 panelists, thank you very much, guys, for being here. I'd like to thank Alliance Française, Mike Adega Center for hosting us tonight. Darin, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Johan. Yes, as Johan said, my name is Aderinsola Adjao. I'm very happy to be moderating this conversation today with this illustrious panel. And I'll just go on now and introduce everyone, starting from my right, Judith Okonkwo. Judith is the founder of Imisi 3D, a creation lab in Lagos, Nigeria, building the African ecosystem for extended reality technologies, augmented reality, virtual reality, and mixed reality, and connecting XR communities across the continent. The lab provides learning opportunities and access to XR resources for creators and enthusiasts, while supporting engagement and adoption by the wider community and consulting and creating content for clients. In 2018, Judith set up AR/VR Africa, a continent-wide XR community initiative which held 2020's largest African XR event, a continent-wide hackathon. Imisi 3D's most recent VR film production, Lagos at Large, made the Forbes list of the top 50 XR experiences of 2019. That's not all. Judith is also the creator of the Oriki coaching model and the co-founder of We Will Lead Africa. She is a fellow of the Royal Society of Arts and an associate fellow of the British Psychological Society. Judith sits on the board of the European Organization Design Forum and is a member of the World Economic Forum's Global Future Council for Virtual and Augmented Reality. Welcome, Judith. And next to Judith is Wana Udobang. Wana is a storyteller and artist working at the intersection of writing, poetry, performance, and film. Her works seek to create visceral connections for people and communities to see themselves and be heard. As a poet, she has 3 studio albums, Dirty Laundry, In Memory of Forgetting, and Transcendence, which interrogate memory, familial bonds, healing, and joy. She has performed her works across Africa, Europe, and North America. For her journalism, she has been awarded numerous fellowships, including the International Women's Media Foundation Fellowship and the Gabriel Garcia Marquez Fellowship for Cultural Reporting. Her writings have appeared on the BBC, Al Jazeera, The Guardian, Observer, CNN, and other international media. Her film works include Nylon, a short documentary on grief, and Warriors, a series of video portraits on people living with sickle cell disease. She has spent the last 5 years developing and curating Culture Diaries, an archival project and Pan-African Artist Network, which uses multi-platform storytelling to document African artists. Wana is frequently invited to speak and teach on creativity, communication, archiving, culture, digitality, and the arts. She is a 2021 University of Iowa International Writing Residency Fellow. Welcome, Wana. And next to Wana is Kolapo Oladapo. Kolapo is a lawyer, creative industrialist, and web developer based in Lagos. Kolapo has served in the broadcast industry for 5 years, working as head of digital at Steam Broadcasting and Communications Limited, owners of Cool FM Nigeria. He also currently serves as head of technology and strategy for Clouds Africa. Kolapo's interests and hobbies lie in arts, and he's constantly breaking new grounds by putting ideas into motion with design and tech. Welcome, Kolapo. And as we like to say in Nigeria, last but not the least, Kenneth Gyang. Kenneth has gained international recognition as one of a younger generation of savvy Nigerian filmmakers. His works have appeared at the New York African Film Festival, the Los Angeles Pan-African Film Festival, and the Berlinale Talent Campus. Kenneth received backing from the prestigious Hubert Bals Fund of the International Film Festival Rotterdam to produce the postmodernist dark comedy Confusion Nawa, which went on to win Best Film at the 2013 Africa Movie Academy Awards and Jury Prize at the Pan-African Festival in Ely. The Lost Cafe, his second feature, won the Golden Palm Award for Narrative Feature at the 2018 Mexico International Film Festival and also won the Audience Prize at Africa International Film Festival in Nigeria. Oloturi 2020, his third feature, premiered at the famous Carthage Film Festival. Released worldwide on Netflix, Oloture swiftly became one of the most successful crossover Nigerian titles on the service, creating a buzz and conversation amongst audiences in Africa, Europe, the Americas, and the Middle East, to name a few. Kenneth is a 2018 American Film Showcase Fellow at University of Southern California School of Cinematic Arts, a graduate of the prestigious EAV European Producers Workshop, and co-founder of the film production company Cinema Pata Pata. He lives and works in Nigeria. Thank you very much and welcome once again. So yes, I'll just go straight into the heart of this and start, of course, with the question that is the topic of this panel itself. So everyone you can take it as you go. So the question is, isn't Africa at the heart of creativity? I guess we could be. Would be a way to start the answer. Yes, so I think there's a tremendous from the lens of the immersive technologies that it is imperative that we start to think about what it might mean to create the time and provide the tools for there to be more expressions of creativity with deep technology, which I think is critical for our future.
So our question is,
isn't Africa already at the heart of creativity?
I think I'll continue from you, which is that there is no denying that there's an abundance of talent on the continent, and I think even the fact that talent continues to thrive without the necessary infrastructure also shows the level or the depth of that talent in itself. But I think one of the issues which we can't deny is the fact is around sort of structure and infrastructure that supports that. I think a lot of the time, all the developments that have happened around creativity still sort of stem around talent building, as opposed to a sort of infrastructure that actually elevates the talent or takes it to a space where it can play with other people around the world. So I think that's what I'll say to that.
Yeah, also to continue from where Wana stopped, I think the era of talent search and all these other, discovery pushes within Africa, I think it's time those efforts are met with a little bit more deliberate structure. A little bit of genuine interest in actually advancing those talents in a way where they are they become businesses as opposed to stuff that you show on Ellie DeGeneres for a couple of weeks and it passes on. To Wana's point, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, talent is becoming to matter less and less, especially in our music industry now, and structure and how far you can promote whatever it is that you have, whatever it is that you think it is, has become even of higher priority than the actual talent. So it's now a question of, as Wana said, putting structure behind all of those efforts, all of those talents, and actually have a deliberate plan. And not just a plan, a deliberate attitude and investment going forward to advance those careers in the way that they become talents, in the way that they become actual businesses.
Okay, for me, isn't Africa the heart already at the heart of creativity? I'll go back to my childhood, growing up in the 90s and 2000s, and for me, I was really covered with, I was surrounded with creativity, because if you're going to look at it, maybe internationally, the music that was coming from Senegal or Mali, or you're looking at some of the highlight music that we used to listen to in some of these, roadside clubs in jazz. And so for me, that was because I was really surrounded by, with creativity. That was actually why I even picked up the interest to get into film, for instance. And for me, when you look at even the early days of the film, it was actually out of creativity that people got into the art of making films. If you look at the ingenious way they started making films. So for me, even asking about if Africa is already, Africa already at the heart of creativity, I just feel that it's a given, because we actually grew up with creativity surrounding us.
Very much, Kenneth. So from that point, it leads to another aspect of this topic that we were hoping to address, and I'll start with Kolapo for that question, because you've all pointed out, of course, very rightly, that creativity, we are a creative people here in Africa, but if one is to look at how creativity on the continent is represented in foreign media, for example, you discover that there is kind of a limiting view to that. So the next question will be for Kolapo. Would you say that the current wave as well of international recognition for the music industry and the way it's written about in terms of the partnerships and collaborations that have ensued, do you see it promoting Nigerian music in the way it should, or is it also engendering a limited view of what's available in the country?
I think I'm on two sides of the aisle when it comes to that. It's good that, we've worked so hard in the Nigerian music industry to the place that we are right now. At some point, everybody used to be happy to see Keke and D1 outside the Grammy Awards, interviewing some celebs that just, might not be as popular here, but we're just happy to see that, AIT Jams was the thing, Kenny's music was the thing. Now we have more well-structured, more well-put-together record labels, label services, and even international labels coming here to have, their Nigerian offices. All that is good, but it could be better in sense that, when you look at, stars, it's easy to look at stars like Burna Boy, like Davido and Wizkid, and say African music is, international now. But when you kind of look between the lines as to the economics of it, a lot of this money is made by these artists is being tracked back to Europe, where a lot of these record labels are in as well. So, to my point earlier, it's good. As they say, there's nothing like bad publicity, but it's good that the word is getting out there. People are seeing. I think the strength of Afrobeat and its other variants like Afropop and fusion is people are now hearing stories through music that they weren't hearing before, and these stories are kind of like pressurized diamonds, stories that were forbidden to be told. And now people are hearing it through music, through Burna Boy's music. People are seeing the side of Africa, and I think that curiosity is a very key factor. When you hear a good story, you just want to hear more, whether it's a song, whether it's a movie, and all those things. But it's nice to have the word out there, but a more deliberate approach as to investing in training infrastructure, exchange programs will be of more economic benefit to Africa, and also keeping the noise going when it comes to giving visibility to African art in Europe and in the entire West as well.
Thank you very much. And that as well leads to the next question I still have for you in terms of what Clout Africa does, because I see that you are pretty much a 360-degree service for musicians, for music producers, and for the music industry as a whole. Can you tell us more about how Clout is addressing these things?
So basically, Clout is an accelerator platform for music, content, and we have a live studio, residency services. We have an acoustic studio, podcast studio, a photo booth, and we have accommodation services for some international artists that come basically to provide residency services for them. We have food, we have internet and power supply to just make sure that everybody that is coming here from whatever country or any artist locally here coming to do music can just feel at home when it comes to delivering on their projects. So we have capacity for music recording, we have capacity for live recording, we have relationships with radio stations, TV stations, to basically get the word out there. So we are in all phases of getting your music to where it needs to be, from production to promotion to publishing, and these are the kinds of infrastructure that has helped the growth that you see in the music industry, in the sense that we have talent hunt stuff, programs where we reward people with money, licensing projects. We also work with brands like Budweiser, brands like the UNICEF. We worked on Ocean's Day, I think, recently with Sheon Kuti. So these are the kinds of deliberate actions that we are taking on our part to basically grow the industry, and also make people see this as something you can do as a living, and also create trackable progress for international companies coming into Nigeria to say, look, you can invest here, and we have the infrastructure, we have the expertise to do all of these things that you need to do for an artist in one swoop, without costing you way too much at the cloud studios.
And these services are also available for local users.
Definitely at an affordable price, basically. Basically, and we away from money, we also have discovery, the discovery side of things, where we have people do covers, sessions. We incubate creators. We work with platforms like Trailer to basically create a space where creators who already create with their phone can come and create with actually world-class equipment and sound and video engineers as well, to basically advance their art. So yeah.
Cool. Thank you very much. So from one ecosystem to another, virtual reality. At Artemisi 3D, you cover basically everything that is important in the VR field: training, production, support for exhibition, and everything in between. And next month, you'll be going to France, leading a delegation of African XR experts. The first time that's going to happen at a global event. Can you tell us a bit more about how the idea for this came about, and the concept, how the pavilion itself that's going to be exhibited at the Laval Virtual was conceived?
Of course, thank you for your question. So when I say that we do work developing the XR ecosystem, as you say, it's wide-ranging, and I really like to say that anything that we think will support XR on the continent will dabble in some way, shape, or form. But our actual focus is in three main ways, I like to say. So one is evangelization, because I think with these technologies, it's very important for people to have their first touch and feel of it, to know that it's not something that you see elsewhere or just on TV or that's far away from you, that you can actually experience it here and now. So that's our first focus, getting people to even know what the technologies are. The second is that I believe that these technologies hold a tremendous amount of potential. I think not just for us, but for the global future. It's acknowledged that spatial computing will be the computing platform of the world, in the next few years. If that's the case, then we must be able to tap into that, to be able to use those technologies to build what we need, because nobody else will build it for us. So in that sense, our second focus is building a creator community, making sure that there are people locally who have the skills and the knowledge to be able to use these technologies to create whatever they want, whatever we need. And then the third kind of element is focusing on, I suppose I like to describe them as areas of, significant impact. So we're sector agnostic. We're as likely to do work in the creative arts as we are to do in manufacturing. But I think that there's some sectors in which we can see, like the impact of the technology right now would be tremendous. And that has had us, investing quite a lot of time and resources. And we've done it in spaces like education, in storytelling, and in healthcare. So kind of like with this backdrop, I think it's one thing for us to think about developing these technologies on the continent, which of course is paramount. And one of the reasons that we're really pushing as much as we can at the moment is because these technologies are still considered emerging technologies for what that's worth. I mean, even though a technology like VR is actually 50 or 60 years old, but it has really just come into the consumer space in the last, half decade or so. What that means is that, we're not quite at the same starting point with everybody else in the world, but we do have a chance. If we invest the right resources now, if we create the time, the tools, the infrastructure, like my co-panelists have said, then we really do have a fighting chance. And when you look at that, you then know that one of the things that is critical for us as an ecosystem, as a community building these technologies is that we need to be able to have knowledge sharing happening without restriction. We need to be able to collaborate, and this collaboration must happen across the globe. And that really informed, the thinking around getting an African delegation to a global XR event. Because starting this work, I was quite fortunate to be invited to some of the, the big tech, developer conferences in the ecosystem, things like Oculus Connect and Google I/O, and I go there, and that's great. I'm very happy to be there and to meet and to engage with people. But when I think about, someone who, maybe up in Kano is like building virtual reality and wondering how to test it out, and, is probably thinking about doing something with it that I can't even imagine. I want them to be able to be in a room with the best in the world debating that and finding solutions. And that has really informed the thinking around how do we get an African delegation to a global XR event. Unfortunately, as you can see, it took several years to get here. But yes, I'm very pleased to say that at the end of the month, we'll be taking a delegation from 7 African countries to Laval Virtual. And for those that don't know, Laval Virtual is one of the world's oldest VR, or now XR festivals. I think it's in its 23rd or 24th year in 2021, bringing together all the key players in the region of France that has really focused on developing these technologies. So very excited about this.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And still in the context of content, now I go to of audiovisual content. The next question will be for Kenneth. You've also produced many films that have traveled, as well as TV content that has gone beyond the borders of Nigeria. And to take as an example now, your latest film, Oloture, which was directed for Ebony Life. One of the things that is most interesting about it for me is that it signals a kind of shift from the kinds of films that Ebony Life has done before. So Oloture is more artistic in the sense where its audience is different from the other ones, and also in terms of it being a film that has premiered at a festival, it's also geared pretty much towards international festivals and the audience that not your romantic comedy audience in any case. For you, do you see this as it's representative of your own work, but it's different of what mainstream Nigerian cinema has been for a while. Do you see it as just a trend or something that's going to catch up and continue going forward?
Well, thank you for that question, right? It allows me to go back to the early days of when I got into the industry, and we faced a lot of opposition coming from the film school in Jos, because people felt that we had a different ideology to what is actually in the mainstream. But we were of the opinion that if you're actually going to tell a story, it needs to be visual, and it needs to be visual for people in other parts of Nigeria, other parts of the world to actually understand. So I grew up on Indian films and of course Chinese films, and And sometimes some of these films were not translated, but we're still going to watch those films and understand. And so for me, it was not about what kinds of film we're making in Nigeria. It's not even a problem of if it is just romantic comedy. It's just about the fact that do we have the elements in there that is going to be, that someone in Brazil or maybe in Nepal is going to watch and understand. So now with Ebony Life, it's almost like, cause like this is a production, I mean a film studio that is probably maybe #1 in Nigeria, I think. So, and because they are used to making all these really, huge comedies. Now, when they made that film, I remember my experience. There were a couple of things that I really wanted, but they were telling me that, no, you know, Kenneth, we don't really have the budget because this is not like one of our blockbuster films, right? And so we made the film, and at the end of the day, because it's like universal story that anyone will actually watch it and understand. And so when they saw the reception of the film, some of the couple of projects that they want to do, I mean now, are still in line with that, right? But then it's not just about the Ebony Life, because right now, there's actually, you know, before they used to tell us about the fact that when you make your film, it is the Nigerian audience that will watch it, and we kept saying that it's a really bigger market, I mean, out of Nigeria. And so now you have Netflix, you have Amazon, you have HBO. So the story is not just about you, a Nigerian person, understanding it. It needs to be global. And for me, I just felt that it was really disrespectful to say that, oh, we're making the film just for Nigerians to actually, because like Nigerians will watch those foreign films and get it, but you're saying that if you do it with the sort of, I mean, international storytelling and telling model, Nigerians will not understand it. I just felt that it was just lazy storytelling, to be honest with you. So now, it's almost like whether we like it or not, that is the kind of, I mean, those are the kinds of stories that we're going to be making right now, because the international companies, comic studios coming in with their monies, they want to make films that will really travel. So right now, I think there's like a really huge shift in the industry where people are going to be telling those kinds of stories.
Thank you very much. One of the things that was remarkable for me is that it's about the audience. You don't assume your audience is not discerning, so you don't just continue to have a conveyor belt of similar content for them. And that brings me to Wana, your work as a journalist and as a creative. You do a lot of documentation of the creative space here, and apart from that, you are also a poet and a performance artist, and you mine a lot from your own personal stories in terms of your poetry. And one thing I like about that is that even in responding sometimes to reviews and to reactions to your work, you like to emphasize the fact that labels shouldn't particularly be placed on what it is you put out there. So can you tell us a bit more about that interaction with the feedback you get from people, the kind of feedback you constantly get, and that having to dismiss labels regarding the stories you create?
I think it's very, feedback has always been very interesting because I see myself as somebody who tells stories in sort of different mediums, right, and different disciplines. I'm very big on creative freedom is very important to me, and so I think that I want the audience to also experience that freedom in how they consume my work, I think, as well. So I'm often sometimes getting, reactions to my work where some people think they want to be specific about the experience, and I'm like, take from me whatever you will. The idea for me is I think that there is the universal in the specific, and so I'm always seeing how our individual stories are a point of contact to everybody else. We can see ourselves in each other. There's always this reflection that's going back and forth as well. And so I think I'm interested in challenging the audience to see themselves in the work, not necessarily think about it as connecting to just me or my story, but how do they see themselves inside the work? How do they see their own stories inside the work as well? And I think in a way, people are starting to do that. I think when they watch my work or experience my work, because now I'm often getting more feedback, which is people telling me their own stories or sharing their own stories with me. When, say, they watch a documentary of mine or they listen to a poem of mine, and they're often really seeing themselves and sharing their stories. And so it doesn't become about me anymore. Yeah.
Thank you. That leads me to the second part of this, which pretty much focuses on the perception of African creativity from international audiences. Many of you have collaborated with foreign partners. Your films and your work, your poetry, your music, and the work that you do have all been presented at a point where you have foreign audiences. So that fits also in the context of why we're having this Nigeria-France dialogue. Because as Johan said in the beginning, the idea is to see how relations between Nigeria and France can be improved. And I would like you all to respond to the question of what would you like to see be different regarding how Nigeria is what's the word for that now? English is eluding me. What are the things you would like to see in terms of the dynamics, yes, between Nigeria and international partners? You can use France as an example, you can use any other foreign partner you've had as an example, but just to give us an insight into how these relationships can be improved and to shift the balance a bit so there's not so much of that imbalance where you have the giver and taker relationship, but just give us examples of how these have manifested in your work and how you've addressed that. I'll start with Kenneth.
Yeah. I mean, I was thinking about in terms of that, I mean, partnerships, right? I remember that I was on my way. I was going to go to Rotterdam, which is a major film festival, and I was going to have a meeting with other people. I'm supposed to meet producers and talk about my project. I want to pitch and get money, right? Then, the way that it was before, you know, you come from Nigeria, we don't actually have any form of funding from the government that we're going to say we have backing to come with something. So the only thing you're just going to go and tell them is that, well, you know, I come from this country, they don't really support the arts and all of that, right? But then I thought about it. I told myself that the people who want to collaborate with you, they don't care, I mean, about your country or where you're coming from. To them, it's business, right? So you're not just going to go with the story about the fact that, I mean, okay, we don't really have anything from my own country. So I started researching on the Nigerian box office numbers. And I went in there and I told them, hey, look, like there's a Nigerian film that has made $2 million, right? So think about it, like, I mean, some of the films that gets released in Europe, they have almost the same sort of like box office numbers that we have, maybe 2 million, 3 million. Sometimes it just gets to maybe 10 million, but like rarely, it's so if you're coming with that sort of number from Nigeria, right, and you're telling them, then they're actually going to collaborate with you, right? So for me, in terms of like as in working, that is what I always just think about in terms of collaborations. Like, what is it that I'm actually bringing from my own home country that is going to be valuable to these people, and so that they will know that they are not helping me, they're actually partnering with me. So that's how I look at that relationship with them in other countries.
All right. When it comes to, I'm going to start from the specific before I go to the general. So when it comes to relationship between, for instance, France and Nigeria, I think that's not even where the conversation to start, because where we are sitting right now is the result of partnership and collaboration between France and Nigeria. I think the real conversation is around expanding and redefining what these relationships are, especially redefining them in a way that is economically and culturally beneficial to both France, any country in the West, and Nigeria, and within Africa as well. And it starts from this exchange programs, this investments in infrastructure. We've seen, we have a lot of French, European, American influences in our food, in our movies, in our music here in Nigeria, in our sports as well, and we've been able to see what adding a little bit of that African spice in whatever, whether it's French culture or American culture, what it can do. We've seen it with Asha, we've seen it with French-speaking singers like Louis and the Yakuza. We've seen it with footballers like Paul Pogba and Mbappe. So it's not a question of can it be done. It can be done. It's just scaling it to a level where it's now a business that is beneficial culturally and economically to both Nigeria, France, or any other country doing this partnership. We have people here who have talents, but they don't have the structure to get it out there. These are areas, these partnerships can be more deliberate, can be more invested in, can be more genuine. And I think in doing all of that, it will make France and Nigeria a progress ally in charting a new narrative around how European participation is being perceived in Africa from time. So we can, as much as strong commitments need to be made on issues of, artifacts and all of that, I think we can chart going forward into the future around creating new artifacts that are French and Nigerian in a way where, this narrative can even go to an extent where, it makes better French men and French women of even, immigrants, French men and women in France, because now they have knowledge of, where they come from, and they don't have to pick between being French and being African. They can be both at the same time. So, yeah.
That reminded me of an earlier conversation today about how much of African diaspora is.
Okay, so I think I wanted to go quite specific. So something that's been very interesting to me in terms of when we sort of see these partnerships, and I think I'll be very general in terms of like Western Africa, in terms of creativity. And I think I did say this earlier that a lot of the relationship has always been talent development. And I think I'm really more interested in co-production at this point, where we can now start to sort of flip that value relationship to something that's more equal. Because I find that when it's often just based on talent development, it's somebody doing something for somebody, right? So I'll give you another example of some of that is when we look at a lot of like residency programs, which is the way in which a lot of artists have left Nigeria or been able to take their work to a different audience in a different country. Oftentimes, the process has always been a response. There's always like create work that is responding to this or doing this, and it's always in response to whiteness a lot of the time. And so that's where you end up having a lot of the work or the creative work that is outside of the continent seeming monolithic and always about a certain thing, always responding to something, right? So in the end, the artists that end up making it outside, in quotes, making it outside of Nigeria end up doing very, very similar work or the same work. So it's a kind of another kind of, I don't want to use the word cultural imperialism, but it is pretty much. So I think now I'm really interested in how can we move in terms of co-production, where there's sort of, even if it is talent that's one part is bringing, it is seen as equal to the infrastructure that the other party is bringing. Because, I mean, when countries do those kinds of partnerships across each other, whether one is bringing more talent and one is bringing more funding, they're still treated as both bringing something of value and substantial, right? But when it comes to like Africa and another country, and Africa as a continent, but people are African as a continent, and the West or other countries, it's always like it's as if it's a grant or it is a residency or a development program. Do you know what I mean? And so I think I'm really interested in how can we move from that sort of model to a co-production model, where say as a poet, you can create a show, and you can be seen in different, the infrastructure through the partnership can take this work and be toured in different countries or be seen in different countries, and even money can be made in those different countries as well, as Kenneth spoke about. So the point is that the talent has to now be seen as valuable, because I don't think at the moment it is seen as valuable. It's just seen as raw material.
Okay, so first of all, I just want to kind of like echo a lot of what my co-panelists have said, particularly Juana. I think that emphasis on co-production is so critical. But you know, when you ask the question, you know, one thing, and this is something I thought about over the last couple of years. I remember a few years back, the last U.S. administration, one of their highest-ranking officials was talking at an event, and this was linked to technology, and it was 5G. And it's always stuck with me because they were saying that they wanted to maintain global domination in this technology. Now, when I think about partnerships in the world, and I mean, I'm in the technology space, I have a lot of pause, because I think that when we think particularly about deep tech, which is the space that I'm in, is there really that openness for partnerships, like an equal footing between continents, between ours and theirs? And I think that when you start to unpack that, there are a lot of question marks. But I think that, you know, I mean, certainly that sort of like perspective both here and there is fairly short-sighted. Because I just want to kind of like build up on something Juana said, and she was talking about the talents and kind of like people viewing that as raw potential. Often when I'm talking about the work that I do and why it's really critical for the continent, one thing that I emphasize, and I'm sure you've probably all heard the numbers ad nauseum, is about, you know, the projected population growth on the continent, the fact that Nigeria will be the third most populous country by 2050, and all of that. And for me, what that means is that the workforce of the future is here. And if that is the case, if the workforce of the future is on this continent, then you can't afford to like have them cut out of the technologies, right? You can't afford, well, you know, unless you're hoping that you can control the whole world from one corner with it, and I don't think that's the world that any of us want. So I think, you know, in effect, it really is all of us sitting to start to think about what it is we want, and the onus is on us here as well to start thinking critically about the future that we want to have in 10 years, in 20 years, in 50 years, and to say, okay, if we are going to get to that place, what do we need to do in terms of the ways that we want to work with people, in terms of the things that we want to create with ourselves, in terms of the co-production, so we're telling the stories that we need to tell, you know, and, you know, all of that, the access, the infrastructure, all of those things, how do we start to implement them and make it make sense for ourselves? And I just want to highlight kind of like one last thing to emphasize this point. So, you know, you mentioned the African delegation, which I'm very excited about. And I mentioned it had taken all of these years for us to be able to do it. Now, it's happening, and the reason that it's happening now and that we're going to Laval Virtual is because it's part of, you know, Saison Africa 2020. And I think that, I mean, that's wonderful, but it's also a shame. Because if the season wasn't happening, would there not be an African delegation to a global XR event? What do we start to do so that the things we need, we can build sustainable relationships to keep them happening?
Thank you very much for raising that point, Judith. Before...
I just wanted to add,
it was sounding like an echo from...
Okay, sorry. Yeah, for me, I want to look at the point that's been raised on co-production, and I just want to just relate it to film, where in Francophone countries, you know, the French have been accused of, it's almost like patronage. It's like, you know, the sort of films that they want to see, it is actually sort of films that they give funding for, and even though, of course, we actually want co-production, but we still need to actually think about how our culture could actually be streamlined in such a way that, or our stories could be streamlined in such a way that it is what, the West actually wants to see. So for me, if I'm actually going to talk about maybe relationship of Western countries and Africa, I think that it should really be open, because you mentioned something like that. It's like we need to, because we want people to understand our culture, but from our own point of view, I don't want you to understand my culture from your own point of view. Basically, is what I just want to add. Yeah.
Kenneth, does anyone else want to add?
I think it's really about also redefining the power dynamic. So I think we've talked a lot about the value. So in terms of talent versus talent finance or or funding, but then there's also the important aspect of cultural ownership and respect of that cultural ownership as well. And I think what you say is already what is happening, which is that there are certain kinds of art that is being partnered with. And so in the end, we then have creatives, again, also sort of mirroring that. So if this is what it is to be partnered with, then this is what we have to do. And so we are now losing the multiplicity of stories that we could be telling and art that we could be experiencing from the continent. And then that also now defines gives a sort of a definition of what African art is or looks like.
Yes, and I think in the sense of the idea of also building a kind of star system, you mentioned people who live on residencies, for example. Sometimes they don't come back, and then they become the lone representative.
They're tokenized, of course.
Exactly, they are tokenized, and everyone aspires to be like them, realizing that when you leave that you become what you.
So you have to work to the formula.
Yeah, exactly. Which
you
then,
want to bloom.
as you said, it restricts the kind of creativity that is available on the continent. I think now we'll throw it to the audience. If there are any questions, comments from anyone. Okay, super. There's a hand. Oh, two hands. Wonderful.
Sorry, who wants to talk?
Okay, my name is Damola. My question is to Gian. Yeah, last year, Lion had lost in an Oscar award just because, do you know the reason? Oscar, Gian, they said they are too much, the dialogue is too much in English. And we are talking about that, which our film should not be, we should tell the world about our culture, not the way they want to see it, but the way we are. So what's your take on that? Because it's a big blow to the industry, because that is the first ever nominated Nigerian movie. So what is your take on that, Gian?
I mean, yes. So the academy, right? They actually have their set of rules, and if they say that foreign language for them, it's like where you submit films for them in a language that is not English, then personally, I really don't really care about what they think, because like if we really care about the Oscars, we should actually think about getting our own platform. There's actually going to be like that, our own academy. So it is almost like you're trying to, I mean, I want to win an Oscar, right? And if I'm going to win an Oscar, if I want to make a film for Oscar, then I have to just think about, I mean, the rules that are there, right? Because like I can't come and say as an individual, I'm just going to fight the system that's been structured for, I mean, for decades, right? So, but if we actually want to be at that level, we could be able to, I mean, because we have our own academy here in Africa, why don't we actually support it? And I know that when maybe the AMAs will happen, a lot of us will not even watch it or care about it because we feel that it's very local. So for that, I don't really have anything to say other than, okay, you have to actually stick to their rules. And even though now they said that Pidgin English is now accepted as foreign language, which of course, like she said, is still tokenism, right? But I mean, what can you do? You live in a society where people who have a system actually set the rules for the system. You can't come and actually try to fight the system just like that. I mean, it's the academies and it's foreign language, so yeah, I think that we should just stick to the rules. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Rania Mann. I'm a co-producer of the Real Time Film Festival, and I'm also have a production company, and I also act on film and TV and theater in Nigeria. So my question is regarding the system. We were saying at the beginning of the discussion that the creativity is in an abundance in Nigeria and in Africa, and what we're lacking is a system to support it and to help it grow. And it's growing despite the lack of a system. And I heard a lot of talk about, foreign collaborations to maybe help form relationships that will be structured and will help nourish this creativity. What I did not hear is anything about our in-house system within Nigeria that I think there is still room to maybe discuss how that can help foster. Because if you even just form some kind of a training for creative minds in the country, to tell them about the opportunities out there, to tell them about programs like residencies, like the programs that Kenneth, went to abroad, and people like, in other fields, poetry and journalism and so forth. I think that would also help those creatives, the upcoming rising creatives, to understand how it is that they can actually put their creativity into something that is commercial, that can travel, that it is not just about the content, it's also about teaching them how to put the content out there and how to develop it. So what's your take on that?
I wanted to respond to that. Thank you for your question. I feel like that has already been happening. That they come in different forms. They come as mentorship. It comes in as communities. It comes as WhatsApp groups. It's always existed, and I think we in fact, it's always in part and parcel of our culture and our creative culture. I think even I'm a lot of my career is thanks to those kinds of communities and collaborations that you speak about, and that is also by the sheer will that people are self-organizing without structure and without infrastructure as well. And I think it's happening in silos, in many much smaller spaces, sometimes bigger spaces. And even, so they might not have the names that we think they should have, right? Or an academy, but they are a workshop. They are a festival. They are a group hangout, So we've always found ways to self-organize. And I think that's why we've even been able to see the plethora of talent that we can see in this country and across the continent. So yeah, I think what people are now talking about is like, okay, how do we now move to the next stage of this as well? Exactly.
Good evening, everybody. Very interesting conversation. My name is Aduke Gomez. I actually want to ask Kenneth, you made a very interesting point. I think one of the things that perhaps we don't do as well as we should here is audience development. We don't expose our children and our young people to the different types of theatre, different types of entertainment. So if people are just exposed to one type, that's the type that they think they have. It's like when you have a child, you don't just give the child one type of food. You have to expose it to different types of food so that their tastes can develop and be refined. How do you think that as Nigerians we can engage our children. And I mean quite young children, I don't even mean, by the time people are at universities, their tastes are kind of formed. Young people, how do we expose them to the different types of content that there can be, so that they don't think content should be like this, and that if it's not like this, then I don't like it. Thank you.
I mean, I'm still like thinking in my head if I have the formula for that, but recently, maybe 3 days ago, I made a long Twitter post, and I talked about how I got to make my first film, and when we wrote the scripts and we wanted to get executives, nobody wanted to give us money. They said that the script is different and that nobody was going to watch it. And so we had to go to Netherlands in Europe again, and we got funding. We made the film. And it was just a bunch of young people that wanted to make a film, right? We all came out of film school, and so the film eventually got made. Now, the first thing was that when we put it up for AMA, it won Best Film, it won Best Nigerian Film, it won, even in like regular Nollywood awards, it won like Best Director, Best Cinematography, then Best of Nollywood Awards, it won like 5 awards there. Then internationally, it opened New York African Festival, and then won jury prize in LA, right? Now, what I'm saying is this: sometimes the system is created in such a way that you can't actually break into it. They said Nigerians want to watch comedy, you make another film, the cinemas will tell you that, oh, we don't actually want to, put that up, right? Then when you get to TV, which is where, children are supposed to, to have their shapes like shaped. The problem is that as a creative, when you make the content, it's even very expensive for you to actually put it on a platform. Like, traditional TV and all of that. It's really, really expensive. So nobody actually gives you any form of support. So at some point that you might actually even give up. Do you understand? I think that for me, for people to be exposed to another kind of content, we have to just do it maybe like the way I see it in some places in the West, where it starts even from secondary school. Like, we need to actually have culture studies, and where children are exposed to these things in secondary schools, and maybe even nursery school, primary schools, secondary schools. So they have, if you actually have that if there's actually maybe a cultural program that will actually expose our children, like there's funding for you to actually expose children to some of these things, right from, very young age, schools, then I think that we can actually head up somewhere. But if you're going to look at it from an industry point of view, it is really hard to actually break into the system.
Yeah, so basically to add to that, apart from the expense of it, I think a lot of narratives that are encouraged, apart from people like Kenneth, who kind of go overboard to make something different. I think there's a kind of narrative and this kind of expectation within the system from even the audience themselves. So when they see a character, they already expect some kind of, they kind of can figure out, what the movie is going to be about. Like if I see Patience Uzoko, I already know, the wife is in trouble. Or, Chiweta Lago, I know some brother is going to die somewhere. And I joke about this all the time when I say, oh, Nollywood is kind of the reason why Lagos is overpopulated, in the sense that in the movies, they're like, oh, when you go to the big city, you're fine. And decades later, everybody is in the big city at the end of the day. So I think the answer to that is more people like Kenneth making different type of art. It's not going to get easier. Nothing, I've never been in Nigeria where the dollar fell, the dollar price reduced ever. So I don't think it's going to get easier. But I think it's efforts where you kind of damn the consequences and you look at the bigger picture of what the industry is supposed to look like, because you're going to get good at what you keep doing. Miracles will not come from heaven and change things. But I think when we have more individuals like Kenneth, like Wana, like Missy 3D, basically redefining the culture and giving, culture shock, and people are like, oh, okay, I like this. Kind of like the same way Afrobeat was first perceived as the Caribbean sound. They tried to sell it as Caribbean, but Afrobeat is like, no, this is this is not Caribbean music, but it is Afrobeat. It's horns, it's drums. It's not, marimbas, and it's its own thing, and you can add toppings to it. It could be Afro pop, it could be Afro fusion. But I think there's to speak to your point about audience sensitization, as I would call it. I think it can come from the audience. It's not going to get easier, but more people have to be empowered with infrastructure, with funding, with stuff like this, forums like this, to basically say, okay, there are more of you. There are people that are thinking the way you're thinking. Even sitting down here, I've already learned some stuff about questions you guys have asked, reflections from co-panelists, and even the questions being asked themselves. So increased intensity in exercises like this, funding people like Kenneth, people like Wana, just going against the grain. Trust me, it's not easy to be these guys, because when you kind of go against the system goes against you too, financially, economically, and you find yourself in a place where you kind of, exist in isolation, and everybody's like, hey, I told you to do, you know what I'm saying? So over time, I think the internet is our best bet to get those content out, because you don't need to tell anybody, ask for permission. As long as Mark Zuckerberg is fine with it, you can get it on there. And but the internet also is filled with a lot of terrible things. So for our institutions, they need to make life easier for us, and for the audience themselves, they need to be able to open themselves to new experiences visually.
I wanted to say that I think, it's a process, and I think it's happening. It might be slower than we think, but it's happening. And it's happening with individuals every single day. And I think it's something that I always encourage everyone. If you see something that's missing, start it, however tiny it is. Even if you start a film club in your house, it's a process. I mean, you've been, you're a poet as well. And you were here when, you were in the system when, poetry was, nobody cared about it. And then now somebody started the Lagos Poetry Festival. Somebody started, something about Bogobiri Nights or whatever. And then the next thing, people are performing poetry. Then companies are calling people to perform and paying them. And there's now an industry and a system. People are actually writing poems as campaigns for banks, So we've seen that happen. We saw Lights Camera Africa. It's Ugoma that started it. Somebody just started it, called a contact in the hotel. Can I use Southern Sun and one room? And I still remember the first Lights Camera Africa, and it was one room that we used, right? And we watched, that's where everybody got to experience Confucian Nawa for the first time. So I think it's really about, if we want, every single person has a duty. If we want to expand the palette and the taste of the audience, we need to also start creating those spaces, however tiny they are. I know there are lots of people who feel that, institutional change is this big thing, but I think institutions are run by people, and as individuals, we can start our own new institutions. However long it will take, however small it will be, it will still grow, and there's still going to be some kind of effect.
I just want to add one last thing. I think my co-panelists have really kind of touched this question from all angles, so thank you for your fantastic responses. But speaking specifically to children, because I think you mentioned children in terms of the audience development, and one thing that I've seen that I think can be effective is getting children to engage creatively with other things, with the sciences, with technology, because, and I think about, say, makerspaces in Lagos like STEM Cafe. Once they're there and they're inspired to kind of actively create and build, that mindset transfers to other things. It transfers to the arts, it transfers to all sorts of other sectors, and then they start to demand. And I think when our audiences demand, we will create alongside the pioneering work of the creators here.
Hi, my name is Torre Shokumbi. My question is for Judith. You mentioned that there's like a problem with, say, having equal partnerships with the industries between like Africa and like the rest of the world, especially with like deep tech where your company is based. I also own a startup, and I understand from this funding part of your career, a lot of the question people ask you is how are you going to scale, how are you going to grow this? The problem or the situation we kind of also stumbled on as we were kind of developing our product is that usually when products are about to be launched, there are not enough use cases, and this kind of leads into this conversation about audience development, because Nigeria doesn't really have that tiered level, like there is like high level content and there's like middle level content. We don't really have that. It's really whatever goes on air traditionally or whatever goes on like terrestrial broadcast. But specifically for deep tech, what are some of the direct operational limitations that you face in the industry where what are some of the direct operational limitations you face in an industry where there are not directly enough use cases for things like, say, like AR, XR, and what are some of the, even if it's hypothetical solutions that you've thought of to, breaking that barrier between your product that's good and people who might need that product, who might not be able to, say, have access to expensive gadgets, or because it's that niche problem. Like, people here, this hall is almost empty, for example, but it also shows you that size of people who are willing to have these conversations are limited. But what are the direct operational limitations to kind of nail that thinking? Thank you.
Thank you very much for your question. Yeah, I'm often asked about kind of like limitations to XR, and as you can imagine, I mean, we're all in Lagos, so we all know about electricity, don't we? And that's fundamental for this technology, as well as connectivity, access to data. And then, of course, there's the hardware as well. Now, one thing that you may or may not know, if you don't engage with VR specifically, but something that I personally find extremely curious is that all of the big tech companies, not one of them sells their VR hardware on the continent, right? So you can't go into a store in Lagos and actually get a Quest headset or a HoloLens or anything like that. And that in itself is an incredible barrier because of course we all know the purchasing power of the Naira. We know that these tools, this equipment is considered, I mean, fairly pricey certainly when it started. But then if for you to purchase a VR headset, you are paying almost double what someone in the US is going to pay, we have a problem, right? So I think that that's, the first thing, that even if you want to deploy solutions locally, you've got to think about how your user will access the solution. Then alongside that, I think that, obviously there's the whole space of getting people to understand what is possible with these technologies and embrace them. And I think that's where the evangelization piece that I spoke about comes in. But in terms of solutions, just to kind of like go quickly to that, I mean, a key passion of mine, something that I hope will happen sooner rather than later, is that we start to locally manufacture, and now speaking specifically about VR headsets on the continent. And this is important because we have to have the platforms to distribute the content that we know we're creating for us here. We also have to have the platforms to deploy solutions that we need. And if you're wondering what a solution might look like, one that I'm always keen to share is looking at the situation in education. As you rightly said, with a lot of these technologies, them being almost at the bleeding edge in terms of, being deployed locally, you will not find commercial use cases like popping up and down. And that can't quite be the way that you're planning if you want to succeed, right? You've got to have like the long game planned out. But back to education. If you go into the public schools here, you know what the situation is. You know that the class size can be 80 students, 70 students, 90 students, and one teacher. And that it will be very basic infrastructure. So there'll be chairs, tables, and maybe a black or whiteboard. But that's it. Now, if we know that we want all of our children, and the majority of the population are in these public schools, to have access to quality education, how in the world are we going to do it? We know that it's not even remotely possible that will be able to deploy enough funding to have traditional brick and mortar schools, to have all the labs that we need there, to be able to fund all the resources that they need and the quality teachers. But if, for example, you're able to put a VR lab in a school, then all of a sudden you're able to virtually provide things like labs for the sciences, you're able to take them to the pyramids of Egypt, they're able to explore outer space. For me, that's a cost-effective solution that can completely transform education, right? But to be able to do that, I think we have to take the route where we're saying, how do we then connect with the people who actually care about education? And this is whether it's government or, international organizations, whatever the case may be. How do we provide empirical evidence that this is the way to go with these technologies, and then start to deploy it in that sort of situation? Because I think once the results are out, then people must buy. If not, how do you justify, being stuck in the past?
Thank you. If it's fine for you, I will take 2 other questions at the same time and then give it to you.
Thank you very much for this conversation. It's very interesting. I just wanted to comment before I ask my question. But when you said that Lagos is overpopulated because of the image of the town, I have to tell you, I was in Senegal in February. And when I said I live in Nigeria, in Lagos, they were like, well, Lagos is so beautiful, it's so beautiful. And I was like, yes, and I understood that they thought the whole of Nigeria is a big Lekki. Like they but it's interesting to know, to see how the cinema is actually portraying a good ambassador for a country. But anyway, and I wanted to know, it's a bit linked to my question. It's very true. You said that now the art, the creativity of Nigeria has to open its and be sold as well all over the world. And my question is, how do you make sure that you also keep your identity and you don't only answers, to what the big companies with the money, will set. And I think especially, Nigeria will be the leader on that in the continent. So how as creatives do you manage that?
All right. So,
Thank you. So my question. My name is Tabia Princewill. I work in public policy, actually. So my question is around this idea of gatekeeping, because we've been talking a lot about audience development, and I think for me, the frame through which we view that is a little bit problematic, because we have this way of blaming the audience, blaming the consumer for their supposed lack of interest in a certain type of content or product. When, in my personal experience, so before I kind of went into policy work, I used to run a talk show on channels, and it's actually a lot of the banks, a lot of the gatekeepers, a lot of the people who fund content creation who will tell you that Nigerians don't want to watch a movie that's a bit more cerebral. And I had an experience. I've had several of these experiences where I would do like very small screenings in areas that people will consider very random, and you'll have agberos and people that you would think would not necessarily want to watch a certain type of movie would sit down and engage with your content, and ask questions that I guarantee you that even in a hall like this, people are unlikely to ask, because our view of life is limited compared to what real Nigerians are actually, going through and experiencing. So it's actually not true that the audience isn't ready or doesn't want, something a bit more cerebral or something a bit more less commercial, so to speak. It's actually the industry that wants us to remain very, very commercial and very, formulas. Guy meets girl, they travel here. I don't want to go too much into that scenario. The thing I'm talking about, weddings and all of that. It's not true that Nigerians only want that sort of thing. So, anyway, so my question is, how are we handling the gatekeeping that makes it that only a certain type of scenario is socially acceptable, basically. Thank you.
Okay, so I'll start from the first question, being the fact that I think for the industry itself, I think Africans are very big on respect, and nobody more than Nigerians are bigger on respect. And as Wana and everybody here has said, co-creation of a content is where that equity really reflects. So without, to answer your question, not losing the Nigerianness, the Senegalese-ness, or the Togolese-ness of any content comes in the fact that, of how that particular production or that particular product is being created. Was it a grant or was it a partnership? There's a difference between let's go and can you give me bread and let's go get bread together. You still get bread at the end of the day, but there's been conversations had, there's been perception. One is symbiosis, one is parasitism. You're giving someone bread, you're going to buy bread with someone, you guys will probably split on the cost and all of that. So I think in keeping our identity, a lot of that is with being recognized as partners as opposed to a charitable donation receiver. And I think a lot of respect, a lot of authenticity is lost in that, in those kinds of relationship where it's like, well, I'm giving you a grant, you have to do whatever, it is. And sometimes I try to be objective. You can't really blame the person giving the money because whoever is giving the money doesn't want something that will not make an impact, because whether or not you like it, the person's understanding will be, okay, I want to make something that people will actually engage with. So their understanding of what people will engage is what they will reflect in the partnership. So if you have an insistence on how you want the story to be told, I think to maintain the richness, the authenticity, and to not get your story whitewashed has to come with the partnership that we've been speaking of. We collaborate as partners and not as helper to helpee at the end of the day. And I'll move to the next question and give it to Kenneth. I think he wants to answer. Is basically, I think maybe it was miscommunicated. I don't think anybody is really blaming the audience. I think it's a question of, I think to even crack into any industry as a different or an alternative or a disruptor, you need to, well, over time, you need to come as an indie person. That's why you see a lot of great, industry shaping directors, especially in movies. You see Tarantino, you see, what do you call it, Wes Anderson. The way they make their movies, there was no studio that wanted to take it at the time, but when they empower themselves to make these movies, whether it's 8 people that watched it or 2 people that watched it, and they are able to get big funding from studios now, where they can actually make movies the way they want to make it. So I think the indie route is working out slowly but surely, and I think you can't blame. Also, I'm trying to be objective now. You can't blame a lot of these guys doling out money, whether it's banks, whether it's individuals, because they are also scared that this is my investment, this is my money, and they already have some type of understanding and they want to see something they are used to. They don't want to hear a story of something they don't know. And you're telling them that stuff will be flying in the skies at Nigeria in the future, and they're like, all those kinds of things. But I think the indie route, funding all of those efforts, and in the little silos, like Wana said, that they exist, just like this, will lead to an effective development, whether it's audience, whether it's industry specific.
For me, if as artists, right, the authenticity, how do you actually maintain that as an artist? You all know what you stand for, right? And if you know that, then of course it's going to help.
Been like so many festivals across Nigeria. There have been so many, different kinds of awards and communities. So I give an example of Ugoma having Lights Camera Africa, which has been instrumental in showing films by independent producers, independent filmmakers that no cinema would ever show any, in Nigeria. And I gave the example of, my friend Efe Paul with the Lagos International Poetry Festival, Olashunayin with Ake Festival as well. I mean, these are just individuals who decided to create their own rooms because, there was no space for us. And so, in the end, the corporates who then fund these things and always say, Nigerians don't read, are the ones who are now funding a lot of those events and saying, so are you people going to go to schools? You go to schools, make sure you put our banner there. do you know what I mean? And now they're like, they're buying books for people in schools, or they're saying, they're funding workshops for young film directors as well. So that's what ends up happening. I think we have to make new rooms, create new mansions, and hopefully keep gates open in the process as well.
I mean, I think they've pretty much said it all, but yeah, I think it just kind of like alludes to, and this is not specifically to the gatekeeping and what can be created and what isn't. Back to, I think, what I first said about there being, us being able to create the space for the time, and provide the tools for people to be able to do things. And really, I think that a lot of like life in Nigeria, in Lagos is like surviving the day-to-day, and we really need to be able to get people to afford the space, the time, the resources they need to create, because once that's there, once it's not that you have to go to a certain organization where the outcome is purely commercial and you're thinking what will be the box office returns, then I think creativity is unleashed.
Thank you very much. Would anyone like to add anything in closing? Okay, so I think it's fair to just give like a summary of some of the very, very important points that have been raised here.
Sorry, if you may, one last question.
One last question.
One last.
Okay, we have to take Charles' question.
Merci. It will be very, very short. 3 comments, very, very short. First comment, creativity. Creativity means that there's a problem with the system. You are creative when it does not work. And this is, I think, very interesting. I love Lagos because the people of Lagos have developed a fabulous creativity, courage, energy, because of the problems. Second remark, I'm the director of Alliance Française, and as you said, this event takes place here. But I want to remind you that it's a Nigerian local association, and we are at the service on that. And I'm very, very proud with all my colleagues that we offer here platform for artists, companies, and everyone for free. And of course, when we began that, we knew we broke the system. We break the system of the business of arts and culture because we can afford, because of French embassy, because of sponsors, of course. So we show there's another system for culture. And very short comment. Last Sunday, we were with friends at the shrine. And we were about 50 people only, paying 1,000 naira. And Femi was on the stage with 25 people. And I calculated as an arts and culture guy, these guys are doing 50,000 naira this evening, and there are 20 on the stage. And they play and sing as if it was the most important concert of the year. It was very moving for me. That's why I love this country, because I can see that authenticity that you mentioned is there. These people are authentic. They're not there for money. They are really involved in their art, in their soul, and it was very moving. Anyway, thank you. It's a very interesting conversation this evening. I'm very happy with that. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, Charles. Okay, so I'll just, yes. Okay, since there are no further comments and no one is sharing their opinion on NFTs, I'll just give a summary of the day's proceedings. One of the things that was most important for me, and I liked again that there were questions relating to that in the audience, was also about the broader audience, because it was part of the earliest remarks actually that came up here, that the audience in Nigeria is discerning, and by trying to limit what you offer them, you constrain creativity as well on the continent, and you limit your audience. But definitely that's not even in question. The Nigerian audience is discerning. And also in that regard, as a creative, just as Kenneth reiterated, it's important to be certain of your authenticity and to not lose your voice, because part of the points that Wana also raised was that through opportunities of talent development, you also experience a certain brain drain and a tokenism that ensures that all those who travel out of Nigeria in pursuit of improving their creativity end up becoming monotonous in terms of their art, and also impacting the broader artist community who think that for you to be successful, you have to emulate certain stereotypes. And it's also important to dismantle particular labels, because of course labels are the way sometimes through which the West manages to understand creativity on the continent, and this can as well be limiting to the art that is created here. So it's very important, and I think it's obvious in the work that you all do that you are disruptors. You are not stuck to any label. It's not easy for anyone to say, oh, that person makes Nollywood comedies and things like that. And to also seek equal partnerships, particularly in terms of relationships with international funders, international partners, in hoping to develop and to enable the larger ecosystem across the creative spectrum. It's very, very important that the partnerships we seek are balanced, not that you lose your voice again, emphasizing that authenticity. And that it's important to enable and to encourage younger audiences. I think one thing that struck me in that regard was also the question of what you have in the curriculum. I think someone mentioned improving cultural studies, and you find that to an extent a lot of the creativity that exists in schools now exists as extracurricular activities, which are not even free. So if you have the opportunity to learn with someone who has experience and it's free, most people are suspicious. But then the school tells you, come and pay for this, and you are paying to only learn how to draw apples and flowers, when you can actually learn with someone who is more advanced in terms of the whole, all of the aspects of creativity. And the final point as well is to create new spaces. I think, yeah, Wana emphasized that. It's really simple. If you find someone who supports and appreciates what you do, stick with that person. Don't be looking for what doesn't even exist now. So yes, create new spaces that embrace your voice, create new rooms, and I like that quote, the world eventually comes to you. So thank you very, very much. It's been a wonderful evening. Please, a round of applause for them, and a round of applause for you as well. Thank you all very much. If Johan would like to close the evening as our main host. No, sorry, Charles is our main host. I want to create some dispute between two French organizations.
All right. Well, thank you very much to the four of you and Darren for the great work tonight. I'm very grateful. Just on a personal note, was one of my last events here in Nigeria, so I'm very happy I did it with you, because some of you marked my stand here. Kenneth, we worked together for the French Nigerian Cinema Days, we worked together for Digital Lab Africa. We don't work together, but I'm very happy we met tonight. So thank you for coming. Thank you very much to the audience. We have one dialogue left for the Africa France dialogue. It will be on the 1st of July. You will find more information on the French Institute of Nigeria Facebook, and also on Alliance Française Facebook. Thanks again, and looking forward to see you at the Alliance Française. Thank you very much. There is a cocktail.